Good morning and welcome back to This Week in Magic Online Finance. Thank you so much for joining me yet again, and as always, we're going to start off with the news. Now, last week might have been relatively quiet in the world of Magic Finance, but this week was nothing but news. Between Mythic Championship 7 and the most impactful Pioneer bans that the young format has ever seen, we've got a lot to talk about this week. Let's gab about Pioneer first. Now, I'm glad I spent so much time in last week's video telling you to hold off on buying cards like Once Upon a Time and Smuggler's Copter until after the next round of bans were announced, because those were two of the three cards that WotC decided to axe from the format. The third card was Field of the Dead, which had the biggest week-to-week value drop percentage-wise of pretty much any card I've ever seen on MTGO. Seriously. On the 26th of November, Field of the Dead peaked at 40 full tickets. Today, you can buy a copy for less than 3 tickets. That is absolutely brutal. Now, I do think that Field of the Dead has a little bit of upside from here, since it does see some play in Modern, but it's not even close to a top spec for me right now. Honestly, the best thing you can do at this point is just shake your head and move on. Now, Once Upon a Time only dropped 8 tickets as a result of the banning, which caused it to drop from 10 down to 2. And I say only because losing 80% of your overall value is a little less painful for a 10-ticket card than a 40-ticket card. But still, this is a really painful blowout for anyone who is holding on to Once Upon a Time during Monday's announcement. Now, as with Field of the Dead, this card does see a decent amount of play in Modern, so I wouldn't be surprised if it does rebound at some point. In fact, I think Once Upon a Time does have more upside at this point than Field of the Dead. Those gains probably aren't happening anytime soon though, so as with Field of the Dead, you can safely ignore this one for now. Lastly, good old Smuggler's Copter dropped 4 tickets from 4 all the way down to 0. I mean, okay, it's not free, but it's worth, about a tenth of a ticket, which is basically free. And this is what Smuggler's Copter sold for before the Pioneer announcement, so it's not likely to be a resurgence here. This card doesn't see play in Modern, so it's just sorta gonna be worthless until people start murmuring about potential Pioneer unbans in, let's say, 2021 or 2022. So, look, this is a shame, but it's not entirely unexpected, and you can pretty much ignore Smuggler's Copter forever. So, that was a bit of a massacre. But at this point, at least we can say that the next ban in Pioneer isn't immediately obvious. If I had to guess, though, I'd say that Nexus of Fate's days are numbered. Simic Nexus is currently the most popular deck in the format, and it's not utterly oppressive so much as it is, completely unfun to play against. Now, I suppose WotC could target something like Dig Through Time if they wanted to nerf Simic Nexus without killing it, but look at what just happened to the price tags of Field of the Dead and Once Upon a Time. And look at Nexus of Fate just climbing another 3 tickets this week casually from 23 up to 26, so look. It's not a given that this one's gonna get banned, but if it's me, I'm selling my set ASAP. Moving on now to the Mythic Championship, we all know that standard demand doesn't shift price as much on MTGO. Most standard is played on Arena these days, while MTGO is the home for Modern and Pioneer. That said, Brazen Borrower jumped about 6 tickets this week, climbing from 22 up to 28, and almost half of that demand came yesterday, while the eyes of the Magic community were tuned to Mythic Championship 7. Brazen Borrower is one of the key cards in both Izzet Flash and Simic Flash, 2 decks that did really well, and it's clear that this is going to be one of the key cards in the new standard environment. Brazen Borrower is also seeing a lot more play in Eternal formats, including Pioneer and Modern, and especially in Legacy. At this point, the sky is the limit for Brazen Borrower. Newer Mythic rares that see lots of play in multiple Eternal formats can spike as high as 70 to 80 tickets these days, and Brazen Borrower really does have that kind of upside. I'm not saying it'll definitely get there, or even that it's more likely than not, but it does have that kind of potential, and its price chart is pointed straight at the sky right now. So, if you've been holding off on getting a set of Borrowers, I just wouldn't wait that much longer. This card is really good and people are starting to see that. Let's move on now to Gaining Ground, where in Standard, well, we already talked about Brazen Borrower, so instead let's take a quick look at Fabled Passage. Fabled Passage jumped 3 tickets this week from 4 up to 7, and this fetch line has been as high as 17 tickets as recently as early November. It sees loads of play in Pioneer as well as play in Standard, and it'll probably drop a bit if Nexus' Fate is banned in Pioneer, since that's one of its key decks, but if WotC doesn't drop the hammer this week or next, well, we could be looking at another 4 to 5 tickets in gains. Speaking of Pioneer, the card that gained the most ground this week in that format was Oko Thief of Crowns, which jumped another 20 tickets from 56 up to 76. Now, this isn't just Pioneer's doing, of course, but Modern's as well. Every week that Oko remains legal in Modern, its percentage of the metagame just keeps going up. At this point, Oko is the 7th most played card in Modern, in addition to the 28th most played card in Pioneer. That is why Oko is surging in price, and that's also why it's not going to drop in price anytime soon. Look, let me level with you. At some point, Oko is going to be banned in Modern. It's not the sort of powerful card that's creating new archetypes. It's the kind of powerful card that's warping the entire metagame around it, being shoehorned into pretty much every existing archetype out there. And so when Oko does get banned in Modern, because it's going to get banned in Modern, it will tank and tank hard. The amount of play that it sees in Legacy and Pioneer is not nearly enough to keep it in the 56 ticket range, much less the 76 ticket range. That said, I don't think this ban is going to happen until the new year, and Oko could realistically break the 100 ticket mark between now and then. So while I'm bearish on Oko long term, I'm pretty bullish on it over the short term. If you're holding Oko, I'd just keep holding for a while longer. Just don't get too greedy. Speaking of Modern, the card that gained the most ground over there this week was Fang Coatl, which jumped 4 tickets from 6 up to 10. And honestly, this probably has more to do with the Legacy banned control deck that finished second at Grand Prix Bologna last week than anything that actually has to do with Modern. The reason why I'm bringing it up here is because this card does see quite a bit of play in both Modern and Legacy, and we're past the latest round of Modern Horizons flashback drafts. So I wouldn't be shocked if this one ends up stabilizing above the 10 ticket mark for a little while, and it's safe to buy in if you want to play one of those cool snow decks in any of those older Eternal formats. Let's move on now to our biggest losers, where in Pioneer, well, we've already talked about Field of the Dead, haven't we? So let's instead focus on Vivian Arcbow Ranger, which plummeted 23 tickets from 50 down to 27. This was just one of the cards that saw its price annihilated by last Monday's bannings, which caused the overall Pioneer index to plummet and plummet hard. Not only did most of the green ramp staples lose a ton of value, but so did mono black staples like Mutavault and Kalidas, as well as Rakdos aggro staples like Goblin Rabblemaster. Basically, if your deck relied on one of the banned cards, your entire brew lost a ton of value last week. That leaves us with a lot of questions. Will Vivian rebound? What about the mono black aggro cards? And I honestly don't know. A lot of the top Magic players were focused on Standard this week thanks to the Mythic Championship, so the Pioneer metagame was kind of, thrown into shambles and hasn't really recovered yet. According to MTG Goldfish, the top 4 decks in the format right now are Simic Nexus, Mono Blue Devotion, Jeskai Control, and Azorius Control. I just can't imagine that'll hold true all the way into the new year. So at this point, the best thing we can do is, lick our wounds and go back to the drawing board. Once Pioneer ends up back in the spotlight at some point, probably early in the new year, a whole bunch of new cards will start to surge in price, and some of those might be Vivian and the mono black staples, but it's just too early to say at this point. Over in Modern, it was another week of overall format losses. Modern Horizons staples like Renin 6, Plague Engineer, and Force of Negation dropped another 4 to 5 tickets this week, which continues the tumble they've been taking for months now. Not only are people focused on Pioneer, but Oko has just made Modern super unfun to play. These cards will rebound once Oko is banned in Modern, so definitely look to buy in at some point over the next couple of weeks. There's just no way Modern remains this much of an afterthought for this long, and even if you don't get it on the absolute bottom of the market, you'll be happy with your purchase once the entire index starts to pop off again. This week's Sneak of the Week is Botanical Sanctum, which jumped 4 tickets from 6 up to 10. And if you look at its price chart, it's basically just an arrow pointed straight up at the ceiling. Why is this happening? Well, you can blame Pioneer. With Simic Nexus and all the Oko decks running around the format, Botanical Sanctum is currently the 10th most played land in all of Pioneer, and yes, that includes the 5 basics. Now, non-basic lands are barely worth a ton in MTGO, but I could easily see this one land somewhere in the 15 to 20 range, at least over the short term. It's seeing a lot of play right now, and it's quite good. As always, let's end the week by taking a look at the MTGO Trader Sales data over the past 7 days. And this gives us a really good idea of which cards are the most popular on Magic Online right now, which ones are selling the best regardless of price increases or decreases. Looking at overall sales by volume, I was shocked to see Thoughtseize as the best-selling non-basic land of the week, despite the massive nerf to mono black aggro. The price dropped about 5 tickets from 20 down to 15 this week, but based on these sales figures, that drop might not last for long. The paper Magic price hasn't dropped at all, and Thoughtseize is still the number 2 most played card in the current Pioneer metagame. So if you're looking to snag a set of these at a slight discount, this might be your best shot. In terms of overall sales by price, well, you had to know it would be Oko and Thoughtseize again, right? Just like last week, these 2 cards are doing gangbusters business on MTGO, and both are slated for further increases in value. Also making the list this week is Brazen Borrower, another card I expect will be climbing this chart in future weeks. Now, one surprise inclusion is Mox Opal, which bottomed out at 20 tickets a couple of weeks ago and has been kicking around in that range since then. Mox Opal was as high as 55 back in September, and look, I bet it'll break the 50 ticket mark again at some point in 2020, so if you've been waiting for the window to snap these up, this might be close to the end. And that's all I've got for you this week. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will be back with you yet again next Monday morning for another episode of This Week in Magic Online Finance.